I got big dreams just like baby. I've been joining forces with the likes of an A-team. Lights, camera, action, we ready to roll. Alright, faces, everybody, let's put on a good show. Line, the deadline. Big time, big time. I'm a head time, the rare kind. Big time. I'm a living legend. Whipping, master, minor. Big time.
So, as we've just seen, SailGP is an inshore international sailing competition, and it's very nearly at the end of its third season. So the grand final is set to take place on the 6th and 7th of May in San Francisco. And Melissa, thanks for joining us, Melissa.
Thank you.
Melissa is responsible for SailGP's production and leads the teams responsible for SailGP's global content offering. Last year, SailGP reported a 131% increase in its dedicated broadcast audience of 39.2 million, along with 16 million event live stream views on SailGP's digital platforms, including Facebook and YouTube, with a total watch time of 2.5 million hours. So Melissa is here to tell us all about how SailGP has built on those numbers this year, and also about the evolution of SailGP's content, digital and online strategy. Melissa, so in the session earlier, Raj spoke about the convergence between broadcast and digital. So I wanted to start off asking you about your role. So previously you were a producer and head of live content at Red Bull, head of production at Meta for 4 years, but now Chief Content Officer. And that's a relatively new title, isn't it, and a relatively new role. So I just wondered if you could give us an idea of what that role entails and why there seems to be a bit of a rise in the number of people with that title as well.
Yeah, I mean, we at SailGP are basically a sports entertainment property. So video and content production and content creation and the way we represent ourselves globally is very, very important to the company. It's pretty much with a premise on almost everything that we do. And the title, I think, Chief Content Officer, is a reflection on the fact that there is the convergence happening. They're broadcast. I have a deep host broadcasting experience. I did two Olympics, Commonwealth Games, motorsport in the past, and that was back in the day when there was really only broadcasting. It was the only way to really get your content out there, or there was a long form production which was sort of separate, and creative people did the long form and technical people did the live broadcasts. What we've seen, and I think I saw it first at Red Bull, is this idea that digital production was rapidly growing, and a cheaper and faster way to get your content, your brand and your voice in front of a large number of people. The natural progression was to go to Meta and learn deeply about social and algorithms and what the teens were watching and how they were watching and how they were operating in a different world to perhaps what an over 40s or an over 50s linear broadcast watcher was consuming on their weekends. So the title really brings those things together. It brings together the live broadcasting, the digital output of your broadcast, and social media, which I do think is starting to really develop its own personality, different to, say, longer form digital production. And then you have the very traditional 30 minutes, 1 hour long content production that sort of tells your brand or delivers your brand voice to a larger audience.
And tell us about your team as well. How is that structured? What kind of roles do you have in there?
So I have three key team members, I guess. It would be the broadcast, and we have an executive producer who runs broadcast. It's 140 people. Important for us and important to understand about SailGP. We're powered by nature. We have a massive purpose mission, and that is to leave the world or the planet in a better place. So that broadcast is almost entirely remote. We run it from London, and we have a footprint of like 30 people on site. Very, very small number of people, and they have a very specific role of content capture. Then the second part of that team, very important role, is the head of content or director of content. And that person is responsible for our long-form production, for features that go into the broadcast, for ensuring anything that we create or do also goes into a social content production format. And that is also developing in a way where we have a digital production tool and digital production team for longer form YouTube and Facebook content. And then we have our head of production who keeps everyone in line. So we have Mariah Stanley who is budgets and workflows and communication and making sure that those other two units are working in lockstep so that we're as efficient as possible and our footprint on site remains as small as it possibly can be.
And let's get into that content strategy then, if we can. So what are your aims? What are you hoping to achieve with all of that content that you're producing?
Awareness. Right, quite frankly, we're a startup league, we're in our third season, and we want to be on as many platforms in as many formats as possible in front of the largest number of audience possible. So I think I describe it, or I like to describe it as a 7-platform strategy. You go broadcast is a platform, it goes out globally, we have 180 different broadcasters who take us, we have free to air, we have pay, we have OTT, so that's a platform, and we put a lot of time and effort. Now our product for the broadcast is the highest quality possible, and it's very, very high tech. On site we don't have any cabled cameras, so if you've ever heard our CTO talk about Oracle Cloud and how we pull everything together, it's done with massive data transfer. And then we go through the platforms. We have a Facebook audience, and we deliver content to that Facebook audience in a way that makes sense for Facebook. We have a YouTube, channel, but within YouTube now, there's also those different levels. There's the, subscribers or the core fans. There's the casual fans who are discovering us for the first time, and then there's the curious fans who often come to us through new initiatives like Shorts. Which is vertical video production on YouTube. And then we roll through all those different platforms, TikTok being a really key one for us to engage an audience that otherwise would probably not turn on the TV to watch a linear broadcast. And I enjoyed the previous conversation about authenticity, because you've got to be yourself on each one of those platforms, but each one of those platforms is looking for a slightly different version of you. So our TikTok content is very, very different to what you see on a linear broadcast, but they all carry the same voice of that sports entertainment property. We're about racing, we're not about sailing. Sailing is a foreign term for us, right? We have a lot of jeopardy, we have very fast-paced competitions, a lot of incidences where boats and people could get themselves into a lot of trouble moving at those speeds.
And you have 11 events throughout the year. So what are you capturing on a weekend where you've got all of that action that you've just been describing? What sort of stuff are you capturing?
So as we sort of split it into two. The main capture is our on-water assets, which is helicopters, boats, capturing the event as it rolls out. Very key for SailGP is augmented reality. We have an augmented reality field of play. So it's, although I'm Fiona Morgan, our Chief Purpose Officer, would love to not see a helicopter flying around. We do use biofuel. We're very, very careful with our helicopter usage. It is not the biggest fuel usage of our event. And we have an augmented reality field of play. Once you see that on TV, you can start understanding, who's in front, who's winning, who's taken the wrong path. And those on-water assets are sort of the key production. But we also see the shore assets as, any, content can come from anywhere. And we split it into each team has a videographer. Each videographer is shooting what that team needs to produce for their own local audiences. They also need to shoot for Racing on the Edge, which is our long-form production. We also have vertical video shooters. So anyone with a phone can be a vertical video producer. But we bring people along who don't know our sport well, don't know sailing well, perhaps the first time they've ever seen, and they come with a camera and they're just shooting content that gets sent back to Ealing, where we have vertical video producers who turn that into the right sort of TikTok, Reels, Shorts content.
So that's all done from Ealing?
It's all done from Ealing. We really do say, if you're on site, you're contributing, you're shooting, you're making something that gets turned into the production once it hits that Ealing studio. And in the end, Ealing is just like sort of a code word, or our London production is a code word. They could be sitting anywhere in the world and turning out productions based on the huge volume of content that's coming in to our media asset management systems.
So that's during race weekends, those 11 events throughout the year. What do you do in between those events to try and maintain that cadence? Because obviously you've got, tons of, amazing footage and sort of high energy clips, I'm sure, during those weekends. But what about between them?
Between events, there's nothing. There's not a lot to shoot. We ask our athletes often to, just do pieces to camera, but we have shot so much content on site with that small number of people, and brought so much of that content back to London that we are almost like in a content creation factory mode from that point onwards. We have our vertical video producers turning out the shorts, the reels, the TikToks. You can create a TikTok about SailGP from the office. We have little boats around. You have Marshall the cat doing the little dance above the boat. It's more about creativity at that point. There's archive content. There's things that have been said. We use, Venly, which is an audio tool. We have a podcast that we create. We have Racing on the Edge that's been shot on site and then turned around 3 weeks later for the longer form production. So I don't think we're never at a loss for things to create between events. It's a matter of managing how we satisfy or make sure that we're authentic to that voice across those 7 different platforms, to make sure they're being fed in the right way and our audience are interacting in a way that we can leverage and work on.
And I wanted to pick up on another point that Raj made during the previous session about commissioning content via the audience as well. So how do you go about that? How do you kind of make sure that you're on top of those numbers and those indicators of what's doing well and what's giving you a kind of clue as to where to go next with a lot of this social content?
We have a lot of data, a lot, and I think data is really, really important. I spent a lot of time reviewing, when did someone engage with this content? How long did they engage with that content for? Where did they drop off? Why is this piece of content more important than that content? It really informs everything that we do. It's not just about data, though. It's also about, the insights that you get, like the anomalies, the things that didn't go well can teach, again, what Raj was saying, what you should make next time. Where data has played a massive role for us is, I think, in the broadcast. Seeing where people joined and dropped in viewing patterns has meant that we turned our broadcast from a very sort of informative, sailing-heavy, explanatory type broadcast into, we just get to the racing as fast as possible now. We know people like to see the boats on water. We know it's extreme. We know there's a lot of jeopardy. Anything can happen. Is there a lot of wind? Is there not enough wind? All of those things are driving audiences to watch longer. So we're giving audience more of what they want. When it comes to, say, TikTok, which is, again, really, it's a little bit easier to look at the data, when something extreme happens and we get it out very, very, very quickly, like man overboard clip, it absolutely it takes off. It's like a rocket. And you can't predict when you're going to get one of those clips, but now we know when something is visually arresting within the live broadcast, we have our vertical video producer sitting there in the gallery. They can very, very quickly turn that around, get it out on whatever platforms they need to get it out on, and the impact or the uplift on viewership from that it ripples through everything. People start tuning into YouTube to find more of the content. What was the rest of this story? What happened next, And those sorts of things are where we've seen sort of this content factory approach within our London setup being very, very effective.
And when you say you turn those clips around quickly, what sort of time frame are we talking about there?
Well, Man Overboard, which was Matt Gottrell on the UK boat, he went through a very thin piece of plastic at the front of the boat. The boat turned very quickly, and the G-forces on that boat pushed him through an area that I wouldn't have believed a man could get through, but he was forced through that little gap in the boat, and he was tethered to the boat. He was sort of bouncing up and down. Once we have the WhatsApp groups with the safety committees and all the relevant people, umpires, etc., saying, okay, is he okay? Is he injured? What's the waiting for the green light from the right committees? Once that green light came through, that clip was up.
Yeah. So you're creating whilst that conversation and whilst all those.
Yeah. The
WhatsApp
faster, the better. And I think if we didn't set up in this way, it could have been a lot of conversations before we got to the point where that was published, and then it's all about speed sometimes, and someone else could have published that and got that viral moment before we did.
And you said earlier that the aim is about awareness, and obviously through some of these clips you're pulling people perhaps from social media to that live broadcast. How are you then making sure that those viewers understand what's going on? Because there's amazing use of graphics and overlays to kind of explain the action. How do you make sure that your broadcast partners have got the kind of tools and the information and everything they need to tell that story and to make sure the audience is up to speed?
We set up a similar system to FIBA, whereby broadcasters get all the promo assets from us. We do sit down with all commentators who take our broadcast live and go through, what are the big storylines. They have access to all the content that we have, and we make them, often talk to our broadcasters, especially some of the bigger ones who are more invested in, creating specific bits of content for them. But essentially, at the stage we're not really talking about sailing in a way that we're trying to explain what sailing is. We're just creating a product that's very, very interesting for someone who enjoys racing. So we don't talk about jibing and tacking. We don't talk about, windward and leeward. We try and very much simplify the actions that are happening on screen so that anyone could commentate over them, as long as they have the information about the athletes, the jeopardy, how the race is going to roll out. We don't really feel like we need to do a lot of, this is what a tack is, this is what a jibe is. However, that being said, season 4, we are going to reassess. We've found, again through data, people really enjoy our content about the technologies in the boats and how the boats are created and the speeds at which they reach. And we will go back using that data and start creating a lot more content about the technological aspects of what is a really, really high-tech sport.
And what channels will you use to do that? Is that purely for the broadcast, or will you be using those social media channels?
We will use it in their various formats across all platforms. Yeah. And again, we have a 7-platform strategy, but within each of those platforms, we have our core, our casual, and our curious viewers. And we use that content to continually drive them to what is the longest form production, where we're going to have the most engagement with them.
And can you give us an idea of what some of the tools are that you might use in order to do that as well?
Greenfly is a good one for us. We use Greenfly Greenfly is a tool that's really handy in the push me, pull me of content back and forth between what we're doing in London and on site. It's also a great tool for our athletes to use and send out on their completed content. But at the moment, we're using it a lot to get anyone who's shooting content with their phone. Could be a boat driver, it could be someone who builds the tent. Any good content from on site can come to us and be part of our content creation hub. We also, I mentioned Venly, we're using them as an audio clipping tool. We use Monday.com to to make sure that our distribution with our digital team is happening in a really very clear and very organised way. We use Kisway we've been experimenting with them to create different styles of longer form programming for YouTube. We talk to a lot of vendors about a lot of different options, but in the end, the tools that we use are those that help us scale out. You know, they're reducing probably a human, but they're also allowing us to do things at scale across, you know, the 9 teams, 11 events. Next year will be 12 events.
And you've got a very well-stocked YouTube channel. So I think there's about 3.5 million views for the explainer video that you've got on there, and around 500,000 views for each of the race highlights as well. How do you strike that balance between making sure that that's a kind of well-stocked place for people to view this content versus what you need to provide for your broadcasters?
We basically take the bell curve of, as we approach events, we create more content for each platform at a rate that hits an apex, and then, you know, we do create less on the way out of the event, obviously, and then it's in maintenance mode until the next event. We don't make particular efforts to stock YouTube. What we do is make particular efforts that the audience that's there are continually engaged. And that's really a lot of judging of what content they are or are not watching. Are they watching more content with a face? Like Lisa Darmanin does a lot of work for us. She's a silver medal Olympian. She's one of the people on site for us. She's a reporter, and she's trying to engage that audience on YouTube through direct contact, through, you know, fan Q&As, through athlete Q&As and tech walks and things that we see often in other leagues have been really successful at. You know, we're not shy about sort of, you know, making our own adaptation of that and then seeing how it travels on that platform.
And so you're almost at the end of the third season. Can you give us an idea of anything that you might have changed over the course of the season, things that you've learnt, and then looking ahead, what might be new for the fourth season?
Biggest change, I think, has been in the live broadcast, going more live more often, trying to break down that idea that we're a sailing league, we're a racing league. We have really learnt a lot about social and what people interact with on our social platforms. We have, oh my God, the learnings have been enormous. We've learnt that communication is the number one asset of any employee working in a remote environment. The ability for people to identify and feedback and make sure that everyone who's sitting in a different location understands what's going on in that location. So, you know, it sounds a little bit boring, but that feedbacking round has been critically important to us this past year. What's coming up? We will be adding another helicopter next year for most races. We have found that as our sport grows and as the storylines grow, one single helicopter is not able to capture everything that we need it to capture. So we're going to be experimenting a lot with how we use that helicopter. Not all of our courses are really, really huge. Some of them are actually quite compact. So talking to the heli operators and cameramen about how we use them in different courses. Augmented reality is going to go next level. I'm putting a lot of pressure on our graphics team to go beyond just a field of play with augmented reality. There's a lot of entertainment value that can be derived out of really good augmented reality structures within a broadcast. Fantastic.
Well, listen, we look forward to seeing that next season, and best of luck for San Francisco in a few days' time as well. Thank you very much, Melissa. Please join me in thanking Melissa. Thank you.